there was a video too that came out of Michigan and Ohio State going into the locker rooms at halftime. Ohio State's looking around like what's going on because they hear behind them Michigan players going nuts on their way into the locker room. I think it was at that moment that Michigan guys were like, we've got this. They don't want it as bad as we do. The energy on Michigan's sideline and in the crowd was such a big part of that win. And Michigan's used that energy from practice in the preseason to practice all year long to in games. They've changed that with the coaching staff, with these players, and it's been a big difference for them this year. And I think it was a big difference on Saturday as well.
Yeah, psyche is such a fragile thing that apparently in this situation, it flipped from one side being confident in a healthy way to dominate the opponent, the series recently, and not be too arrogant that they sloughed it off in any way because they were focused, determined, and got the job done, versus a team maybe being underconfident, not, lacking in confidence because of lack of success. But then that switching, once the team that has the lack of success shows that it can hang, and then maybe the self-doubt creeps into the overconfident team, and it can, flip.
Yeah, totally. I think, let's be honest. Ohio State in this game has been able to, cakewalk to victory a lot, in recent years. So I think for Michigan to actually show up and be like, hey, you're not doing that to us this year, they were probably a little bit shocked, right? And for that defense to be able to shut them down like they did, that offense in general has seen anybody shut them down. So I think all of a sudden when things aren't working like they usually have, and you've never had to deal with that before, you are going to be like, okay, what do we do now? Right. And it's tough. That's where I think, obviously Ohio State had to deal with it against Oregon, but that seems like a lifetime ago. I think Michigan, when they had to deal with that loss at Michigan State, it was a little bit of a like, hey, we're not letting that happen again. And it was able to fuel their fire a little bit going into it. And honestly, I think one thing that we're not talking about on the player personnel side is Cade McNamara. Cade McNamara didn't put up great stats. He's not going to jump out of the box score at you. But Cade McNamara didn't have an incompletion after 6 minutes left in the second quarter. For him to play that well, obviously Haskins got the TDs, but he played phenomenal after that interception. For him to bounce back after that and continue to play well throughout the rest of the game, basically mistake-free, was really impressive.
Absolutely. And again, just we can't get into minds and hearts and know how this all works because it's pretty complex, the human psyche. But on one other note is obviously Ohio State hearing from the so-called experts all week that they're going to win. Right. And any college football playoff conversations didn't necessarily, the ones I heard were not, if Ohio State wins, bam. If Michigan wins, bam. It was pretty much just Ohio State's going to be, they could be playing Georgia. And it was just this assumption that Ohio State's going to be in the playoff.
Yeah, and I think that, how many times have these Michigan guys heard that? They've had to deal with that. People have counted them out in this game for 10 years straight now, right? And they, Ohio State's been well deserving of that praise for sure. But I think led by guys like Aiden Hutchinson literally willed himself to victory, I think, in a lot of those situations yesterday. He said, we are not letting this happen again. And you saw it from him. You saw it in his eyes. You saw it in his play. The one play where he was talking crap to the left tackle there and then immediately put him on his ass. And it was just like, man, you are in a different reality right now, and you're not human at this moment. So that was all just really impressive, and everything seemed to click for Michigan. it just everything came together. Mike McDonald put the perfect defensive game plan together to slow them down. Josh Gaddis was creative, but not too aggressive. We talked about it last week. He needed to be creative, but not conservative, but still needed to eat up clock. He did that at times with the running game. The running or the Michigan's offense in the second half, they didn't have a third down. They only were on first and second down the entire second half. I don't know if I've heard of any team doing that, whether they're playing an FCS school or playing, for essentially a trip to the Big Ten title game. That is just an unbelievable game plan from Josh Gaddis and from this offense of Michigan to really put it to work.
And to see the post-game reaction by Aiden Hutchinson, who at one point, I think at the podium, and he may have stated this elsewhere, just said flat out, we've been thinking about this game constantly, preparing for it, thinking about it. And so it's almost like in this reset year for Jim Harbaugh and turning over the coaching staff, he went from, yeah, I know this is an important rivalry and I can't ignore it. I have to answer the questions and we all know it's important, but we're going to kind of minimize it to, no, let's take it on head on. We're obsessed with it too, and we're going to go after it.
Yeah, and I think all year long, everyone's like, is this real? Or are you guys, are you trying to make it up? Are you is it forced? Is it because you've seen Ohio State do it? Are you just like, all right, that's what we got to do, I guess? Because I think you can try that stuff, but if people aren't actually bought in, if it's forced, it really almost is like worse for that, and people are like, come on, this isn't real, blah, blah, blah. I think they actually did buy in by the end of the year. And I think Aiden is a reason for it. There were times, after practice, after we had Dan Villari he's one of the backup quarterbacks behind McNamara and McCarthy. And he said after that Nebraska game, they had Monday practice and it was the most electric practice they've ever had. And then they got to weights after practice. And he said, usually guys are a little sluggish to get to weights on a Monday. It's like kind of, you go to the training room, you kind of get there when you get there. He said, Aiden came into the locker room and said, weight room, 5 minutes, everybody. And every single person had their shoes on and were there in 5 minutes. That's the type of leader that Aiden Hutchinson has been for this team. He has gotten them together. They follow him. They'll run through a brick wall for him. And I think that's what Michigan has been missing all these years. They've had great players that are kind of individual guys. They've had a Chase Winovich who seemed like a pretty good team guy. I don't think they've had anybody that is to this level of a leader that Aiden Hutchinson is.
It'll be a great conversation many times going through the off season. I don't want to address it here because I want to bask in the moment of the victory and then moving on to a Big Ten championship game. But we will wait and see of whether this tips the scales of supremacy in the conference long term. We shall see. We shall see.